Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My manager was an awful person to me, but I got her fired in an embarrassing fashion. Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store, and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles, and birds, etc., etc. The store manager was an awesome guy I'll call Kurt. Kurt was an old-school guy. He went to work, worked hard, and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large, snaggletooth witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred the fish, whereas I'd kept snakes for the past 4 to 5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on, she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks and had other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team. You are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year. My hours have been cut about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was, and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lack of sales and broken merchandise, etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few coworkers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers, all while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had figured it out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in, she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around, helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations, terrarium supplies like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. She's lazy. She would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to other cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they said she only ever rang up certain customers and she acted weird when they did. They suspected that she was abusing coupons for them by applying hefty discounts. I got my coworkers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior and went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UPCs and the time written on it, and I said, "I think if you look up a transaction from Register 2 at this time last night, you'll find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction." He was a bit puzzled, and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action, I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later, I was at work and I noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching it closely. It just so happened Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door, he called her over to his office. Apparently, waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up the transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but only had about half of the items I listed. But every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame, they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff in the cart without ringing it up. In that time span, she'd given away over $1,500 in merchandise, And he looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that's written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1,000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing/defrauding the store for over $3,500 in merchandise, and it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. And our second story. Reuse unfinished soups for the next customer? Lose your restaurant. This revenge story happened in the 90s when I was working after school as a line cook/chef's assistant at a Chinese restaurant. The place specialized in noodle soups, was the main attraction being our soup stock. The owner used a much-revered, passed-down family recipe. It consisted of freshly cracked pork bones, fresh spices, and fresh vegetables, all kept at a rolling boil for over 12 hours. It had to be started the night before, and the owner was very particular about the soup stock. If it ran out, then it ran out. He refused to cheat, as some places do, by adding water or powdered stock, etc. The owner himself was this really awesome old Chinese gentleman. He had some incredible stories. For example, he enlisted into the Kuomintang Chinese Republic Army in the 1940s and worked as a chef for KMT officers during World War II. He told us about how one time his division's HQ was run over and he had to escape on a push bike ahead of the advancing Japanese army. Eventually, when the Chinese Communist Party took over in the 50s, he was assigned to a steel factory to work for the rest of his life. He GTFO'd and eventually made his way to the U.S. as an asylum seeker. I digress, but my point is that he was an awesome guy and was genuinely kind and a considerate boss. He always made sure his employees were fed before the evening shift and let me study on quiet nights. His son, on the other hand, was a real piece of crap. The guy dropped out of college. His parents saved up for him to study medicine after 2 years. He floated in and out of jobs, but mostly stayed unemployed, living with his parents and using their money well into his mid-30s. He eventually started working at the restaurant, nominally as the front-of-house manager, but in reality did nothing but watch TV and take naps. While I was only a line cook, the old man and I got along really well. He trusted me and would routinely get me to make the soup stock the night before under his supervision. Sadly, the old man died after my 5th year working there. That's when the son took over. The mother had passed years ago. The son had zero cooking experience, but decided to take over as the chef. He didn't like the idea of putting the soup on overnight, waste of gas, and instead got me to do the prep the night before and would just switch the pot on himself in the morning. He would also routinely add plain water to the soup when it got low, so he could continue selling noodle soups. The most incredible thing, though, however, was, disgustingly, he got the waitstaff to throw customers' unfinished soups back into the stock pot for reuse. When I confronted him about it, he told me that it was no problem as the heat killed any germs and threatened to fire me if I said anything. Not surprisingly, customers started leaving as the food quality degraded. This caused the son to panic and cut even more costs. He fired most of the old staff and thus overworked the remaining. He couldn't fire me because I was the only one left who knew how to do the soup. He also stopped using quality ingredients and started buying cheap prepackaged stuff in order to reduce my prep work hours. After a few months of this, I got sick of his crap. As I was about to start college myself, I told him that I was giving him my notice. He, of course, took this poorly and told me that I was a loser. He told me not to bother coming in tomorrow, but I was to spend the remainder of my shift showing a recent hire how to do my job, stating that he would not issue my last check if I didn't complete a thorough handover. I laughed in his face and walked out on the spot. I didn't even bother chasing up my last check. As a parting gift, I sent an email to our local food safety board informing them of the poor sanitary practice of reusing leftover soups. I helpfully also enclosed a few photos that I had sneakily taken of the practice. The board sent inspectors the very next day and closed the restaurant. There were other issues such as unhygienic bathrooms, uncleaned eating utensils. He was issued a massive fine and a list of undertakings to carry out before it could be reopened. The restaurant remained closed and was eventually sold off. I didn't bother chasing up what happened to the son, but I hope he learned his lesson and has done something productive with his life. And our last story. Neighbors call the fire department on my first fire, so we start 2 more. Last night, I decided to have a fire with a few of my friends. I made sure to check the county website to see if we had a fire ban on. Everything was fine. We had a small radio playing in the background. The level of noise was low enough that we could talk without having to raise our voices, and there were 4 of us, so not a loud occasion at all. Anyway, about 45 minutes in, we hear a loud diesel engine running just out front. I go to see who it is, and 2 men in full gear are walking towards me. I'm flabbergasted. They tell me one of my neighbors called and said my house was on fire. I know exactly which neighbors they are because they've done this before, and I can see them through their back window staring at us. So due to the fact that I don't have a fire grate, I can't keep the fire going because of the county bylaws. My fireplace is not suitable for use due to the fact that it's got some loose rocks. True, it's in rough shape. So we shut it down, and I tell my mom. She informs me that we have not 1 but 2 more fireplaces, both equipped with grates. So we start 2 new fires. Within an hour, the department's back. They're ready to find me, but they see that everything's all good and up to code, so they leave. We proceed to turn up the radio and make the fires big and keep on going till 1 a.m. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.